What is going on, New York Giants fans? So over the years, I have compiled a pretty serious collection of New York Giants memorabilia and New York Giants ticket stubs in particular. So what I wanted to do today is give you a little brief overview of what I've collected over the years for my favorite team, the New York Giants, and just kind of go down memory lane a little bit as far as the history goes and the certain games, because when it all comes down to it, at least for me, attending these games and collecting these items really gives me memories of my family and my father and my brother and the memories that we've had together watching these games and celebrating the victories and stuff. So without further ado, I want to take you guys through what I have collected over the years and kind of share the Giants' passion that we all have together. And so, without further ado, here we go. Okay, guys, so this is a recap of the 1980s decade. From 1980 to 1989, we're going to take a look at some of the stubs that I have from that decade here. So we start off with the preseason. I'm missing the August 12th game at the Patriots, but I do have the Chiefs. Then we roll on to the August 26th game at home, preseason, and then a full ticket from the Giants-Steelers game, which was on September the 2nd. And that kind of gives you an idea of what the full ticket looked like. And at that point, we're talking $23 for a ticket in the upper deck, 1989. So we move on to the regular season. We have our away game at the Redskins. We have our first home game, September 17th in Giant Stadium. Then we move on to game 2, September 24th at Dallas. October the 8th is a game that I'm missing at the Eagles, 1989. We have a home game here. Then we have at San Diego in 1989. And then October the 30th, 1989, we have our home game number 4 against San Francisco, it looks like. Then we have at Phoenix at the LA Rams, 1989. We have November 19th, 1989. Then we have our candlestick game against the 49ers on November 27th, 1989. Okay, now we move on. This is a regular season full ticket against the Eagles, just to give you an idea of what the regular season full tickets look like. And then we have the game against Denver, which was the hit, Gary Reasons. If you remember, Gary Reasons had a big goal line stand on Bobby Humphrey in the snow, one of the greatest hits that you'll ever see. And that was the ticket stub to that game. So we move on here. We wrap up the home schedule December 16th and then December 24th. And that was 1989. Now, we did have a playoff game right here. Unfortunately, we lost. That was the Flipper Anderson game. He runs into the tunnel, overtime. So we did end 1989 on a little bit of a sour note. Okay, we move on to 1988. We have a preseason game here against the Packers, preseason game against the Jets, preseason game against the Steelers, and then a preseason game against the Browns. So I do have all of the preseason games from that season. Here is a nice full ticket from 1988 against the Redskins. So you're looking at an $18 ticket now, so a little drop in the price. And that's what the ticket from 1988 looked like. Then we have our second home game here, September 11th, 1988. Page. Then we're looking at the away Dallas game, another home game, game number 3. Our away game against the world champion Washington Redskins. The away Philadelphia Eagle game, a home game against Detroit, and then an away game, nice full ticket against the Atlanta Falcons. Let me turn the page. I am missing this game at Detroit in 1988. We do have Game 5 home. We do have an at Phoenix Cardinals game. A nice full ticket against the Eagles from 1988. And then you can see right here, this is the game against the Saints, November 27th, 1988. And this would be the game that Lawrence Taylor basically won the game for the Giants. He had 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, constant pressure on Bobby Hebert, who was the quarterback. He was redoing his shoulder harness between series. Just an unbelievable performance by LT in that game, which we won. Then December 4th, home against the Cardinals. We move on. We have December 11th against the Chiefs, and then we wrapped up our 1988 season against the Jets, which hardcore Giant fans, we remember how that game ended up, so we won't talk too much about that, but they ended our season that day. Okay, we move on to our strike-shortened season 1987. This was the first preseason game, August 16th. Then we have a full ticket here against the Browns from August 22nd, 1987. So that's what a full ticket looked like. Again, we're looking at $18 for the ticket in 1987. That's the second preseason game right there. Then we have an away game against Pittsburgh, September the 5th. The Chicago Bears away. And then our first home game against the Cowboys, 1987. Then we had an away game against Miami. Nice full ticket right there. Then the 49ers game at home. And then we got to a very memorable game for me. This was my very first game as a child. This was a game that was attended by about 54 people. Not a lot of people in the stands for this one. It was a very not very attended game because of the strike. And the Redskins were a very good team. We were not. But I will always remember that game because it was my first as a Giant fan. Then we have an away game against Buffalo, home game against the Cardinals. Again, full ticket right there. For this particular seat in the mezzanine, you're looking at $21. The other one against Washington was a lower tier ticket, which was $18. Then we have an away game against Dallas, which was the following week, November the 2nd. Patriots, away game against Philly. The Saints, November 22nd, 1987. Then we have the away game against Washington, which I am missing. They were the Super Bowl champions that year, so that one's a little bit hard to come by. Then we have the Eagles home game. We have the St. Louis Cardinals, which was a away game. Then to wrap up 87, we have the Packers at home and we have the Jets at home. And then over here we have the Super Bowl 21 celebration ticket. And this was given out in celebration of the Giants winning the Super Bowl the year before. And this was a gathering that the Giants held that I was able to acquire a ticket to. All right, so now we move on to 1986, which all of us know, a very good year for the Giants, one of the best in franchise history. And it started off with a preseason game against the Falcons, a preseason game against the Packers right here, one of the first home game preseason, I think against the Jets. And then down here, August 30th, we wrap up the preseason. I believe it was against the Steelers right there. Then our first game of the 1986 season was against Dallas, which is right there. Our first home game was against San Diego, Dan Fouts. I believe we had 5 interceptions that day. Then we moved on to the Raiders, a game that many predicted us to lose. The Raiders were 0-2. They needed a win, and the Giants pulled out that win that day and went on a nice little run here. Here's a second home game. And then I am missing the at St. Louis game right there, but I do have game 3, the home game. I'm missing the Seahawks game, which we did lose. That would be the final time that we lost in 1986. So all the way back in October, we ran the table after that. Here is game 4. And here is a very rare thing to come by. A full ticket from 1986. Most people obviously went to the games because the Giants were good. And this particular game against Dallas, a lot of people like to see Giants Cowboys. So having a full ticket from that season is rare in itself, but having a Dallas game is also added to that rarity. So this is something that, very rare collectible. And again, we're looking at $14 for the ticket there. Then we move on to the away Eagle game, which I'm missing. Then we move on to the Minnesota game, which we all know and remember as the 4th and 17 game, where Sims threw the pass to Bobby Johnson. And then we went on to win on a last-second field goal. Then we have Game 6, the 49er game, always classics in the late 80s, even the early 80s and early 90s when we played the 49ers. Always a tough game, always something crazy going on. In this particular game, Mark Bavaro carried Ronnie Lott and company 20 yards down the field after a catch. Just a super, super game between two great teams in the late 80s. Then we have the away Redskins game, which I'm missing, from 86. Game 7 and Game 8 to wrap up the regular season. Okay. Then, of course, we had our playoff tickets. This is the first round of the playoffs in 1986. This was the second round here, which was against Washington, where we won 17-0, and we advanced to the Super Bowl. Very windy day. Both teams very solid, but we ended up pulling it off. That first playoff game that I just mentioned up here, 49-3 over the 49ers. And then here's Super Bowl 21, game that we beat Denver in 39-20. Okay, now we move on to 1985. Okay, we start off 1985 with the Hall of Fame game against the Oilers. Then we have the Denver Bronco game. Then we have a nice full ticket here against Green Bay. Again, we are looking at $14, and that's what a ticket looked like in 1985. Then we come down here, the final preseason game of 1985. Our first game against Pittsburgh. First home game, September 8th, 1985. Then I'm missing the away game at the Packers, but here is a nice full ticket from 1985 regular season game. Looks like against the Cardinals. That's Otis Anderson there. We're looking at $12 for the ticket here. September 29th, missing the away Eagle game. Here's the home game against Dallas, away game at Cincinnati, home game against Washington. Missing the at New Orleans game in 85, but we do have the home game, Game 5, the home game, Game 6, and then the at Washington Redskins game here. Missing the at St. Louis Cardinals game, and do have Game 7, the home game against the Browns. Then up top here we have the Houston Oilers away game as we're getting closer to the end of 1985 at Dallas. Our last home game of the year looks like it was against Pittsburgh, December 21st. And then we have our playoff games that were here. We have the home ticket right here. The game that would have been at home. We did play the Bears on the road, and unfortunately we lost, but it did set us up nicely for 1986. I think a lot of people, a lot of players on that team were kind of upset that we lost to the Bears, and they knew what we had to do to win, and it propelled us to the Super Bowl the following season. So kind of similar to the way we lost to the Patriots in 07, it kind of set us up, and we knew what we needed to do to win. Okay, now we move on to 1984. In 1984, we start off right here with the Patriots, which later on in Giants history becomes a very common game in the preseason. Then we have the Colts. We have our first home preseason game, and our second home preseason game against Pittsburgh again. Game number 1 in 1984 against Philadelphia. Game number 2, September 9th. Game at Washington, the third home game. An away game against the Rams. October 8th, 1984, ticket right there. At Atlanta, and then at Philadelphia right here. October 21st, 1984. Then we have October 28th, October 28th, 1984, home game. We have the away Dallas game. We have the away Buccaneer game. Home in 1984, looks like against the Cardinals. Home game here. And then home game here against the Jets. Or away game against the Jets at Giant Stadium. Okay, December 9th, missing that one at St. Louis. But the following ticket, this is what a full ticket from 1984 would look like. This one happens to be against the Saints, and we're looking at $11 for the ticket on that one. Then we have our wild card round game in 1984 against the Rams. As you see, we did win 16-13, so we got our playoff victory. And then the following week, we lost to the 49ers, 21-10. I do not currently have that one, but that ended up our 1984 season. Moving on to 1983, our first preseason game there. Then again against the Steelers on the road, our second preseason game at home, and then our third preseason game at home. So we did have 3 preseason games at home that year. Game number 1 at home, looks like it's against the Rams. An away game against, looks like Atlanta Falcons, September 11th, 1983. At Dallas. And here is a nice full ticket from 1983 against the Packers. As you can see, $11 now for the tickets. And that's what the ticket would look like in 1983. This one is versus the Chargers. Then we have the Eagle home game in 83. And then the next 2 I am currently missing at Chiefs and at St. Louis. This one was lost, as you can see. And this one was a tie, Monday Night Football, 20-20. Okay, then we move on here. This game 5 was the Dallas home game. Then we have this ticket, which was Lions-Giants, 1983. So in 1983, this was the season where Parcells was hired, and this was his first season. So this is when, things started turning around for us a little bit. As Giant fans, we started to get some winning seasons. This is the Redskins home game here. Then we have the away Eagles game, away Raiders game, and then another full home ticket from 1983 against the Cardinals. That was the last home game right there. And then this right here is from the following year, 1982. But this is what they used to hand out for Stadium Club, for halftime admission, for pregame admission. So this is kind of like what they do now at the stadium for food, things like that. So this was a full Stadium Club ticket for the Giants-Jets preseason game in 1982, which we are getting to right now. So 1982, we have the Baltimore Colts away. That was the first preseason game that year. Then we move on to Game A and Game B for that season, our first 2 preseason games. The next preseason game I don't currently have. That's at Miami. And then this game right here, September 12th, 1982, Lawrence Taylor's first sack as a NFL player, first sack obviously as a Giant. So big game for him that day. September 20th, 1982, ticket there. Then we have a full ticket from 82. I believe this is the Steelers. Yes, full ticket against the Steelers. Then I'm missing the October 3rd game. And then if you recall, 1982 was a strike-shortened season. So these games are full tickets because they were never played. So that one that I just showed you was the Cardinals. This one is for the Bengals, but this is what the tickets would look like if the games were to be played. This is at Philadelphia, and then this is the home game against Dallas, 1982 season. Here is a full ticket against Cleveland, the ticket stub against the Rams, a home game against the Redskins, 1982. And then this game right here, Giants-Lions, was a game that was played on Thanksgiving. It was a game where the Giants did not score many points. It's a game where the Lions didn't score many points. But there was one big highlight from this game, and for you really big Giant fans, you know what I'm talking about. This is Lawrence Taylor's interception return for a touchdown, 95 yards, I believe it was, celebrated by sliding, tore up his knee. But it was some miracle play because he wasn't even expected to play in that game, but he did play, and he went on to give us one of the greatest highlights of his career. Then we move on to Game 7 and Game 8 to kind of wrap up the home schedule. Then there are some away games here that I am missing. All right, on to 1981. This is the first preseason game. Nice full ticket against the Bears. Then we have the home game against the Jets. We have a away game here. I believe it's the Steelers. And this game up here that I just mentioned against the Bears was Lawrence Taylor's preseason debut, his rookie season. This right here is his regular season debut, September the 6th, 1981. I believe it was against the Eagles, game number 1. This is the Redskins away game that year, 1981. Then we have the Saints at home. We have at Dallas, home against the Packers, home against the Cardinals, October 11th. The away game against Seattle, and then at Falcons, which I'm currently missing. Game 5, home game, an away game against the Packers, home game against the Redskins, away game against the Eagles, away game against the 49ers, home game looks like the Rams, game number 7. And then the last home game to wrap up the season was against Dallas. And I do have the playoff game from 1981. I do not have the first one where we beat the Eagles, but I do have this one where we lost to the 49ers 38-24 in the divisional round of the playoffs. And that takes us to the last year of this video, which is 1980. The first preseason game I'm missing. The second preseason game is right here, game B. Then we have an away game against the Colts, a nice full ticket there. Colts charging $12 at that time, so right about the same as the Giants. Then we have the 1980 game, which I'm missing, the preseason game against the Jets. Then we move on to the regular season. Cardinals, right here, away game. First home game, September 14th, 1980. The away game against the Eagles, right there. Then home game against Dallas. Away game against Dallas. Eagle game. Away against the Chargers. This was the Broncos. Game number 4. Then we have a full ticket from Tampa Bay. $10 ticket, Tampa Bay. Cowboys, home game. And this is what a full ticket looks like in 1980 against the Packers. We're looking at $9 now in 1980, but that's what a full ticket from 1980 looks like for the Giants. Then we have a game that I'm missing at 49ers, our 7th home game, away game against Seattle Seahawks, 1980. And then this is the Redskins game on the road, and then game number 8 at home. So we wrapped up 1980 with a 4-12 record. This was obviously pre-Sims and pre-LT, but that was the end of the 1980 season. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to do videos like this decade by decade so we can kind of look at the collection and look at what I have. Again, I have stubs going all the way back to 1930s, so I'm going to kind of keep them decade by decade. So thank you for watching. Hope to see you again on the next video. And if you look at here, these are all the tickets I have. This is the binder that I keep everything in, nice and safe and secure. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you when we talk about the 70s. Go Giants.